Back with everybody. We're going to go back into 1 Timothy now. It's never really good to be away, but it was good to see other brethren. Last Sunday I met down in Washington, New Jersey. I don't know that we know one or two people there, but I don't think very many of us know people down at that congregation. But they're kind of west, near the border with Pennsylvania. And so I got to assemble with the brethren there, and then spend the rest of the week with brethren from all over the place. There was a kid there from Angola. So that was kind of amazing, like the Angola. I mean, yeah. So okay. So had a good week, exhausting week, and it is good to be back just to kind of get some rest for a while and everything. We had finished up, or we'd kind of gotten through deacons the last time I was up here a couple weeks ago. And so we'd gone through elders and deacons. When I was down at the camp, Simon Harris and I ended up with in a kind of an extended conversation about the whole elders and deacons thing. And he pointed out to me, and I never really thought about it before, he said, in the congregations that he knew of, there wasn't a single elder in all of the state of New York. And I never thought about that before, but I couldn't think of a reason to think him wrong either, and don't know of any. And so it's not, I think we all, all the congregations that we know of kind of recognize that this is a difficult process and the qualifications are pretty high, and that's probably one of the reasons that there are not any in this particular state. So, but did anybody, we kind of looked at different questions about qualifications for elders and deacons. Before we kind of leave that subject, does anybody want to bring up anything that they thought of? More questions? Nobody wants to stir the pot? Yeah.
Well, I will admit, when we talked about the deacons, the idea, this is an idea that has never crossed my mind until we had the class. The idea of a deacon serving for a time and then not serving. That idea, we talked about that in class. That had never crossed my mind before.
Yeah, to me it just kind of falls back to the idea is that we see a need identified, and then we assign that to a person, okay? Yeah, if that need should disappear.
Yeah. Use the example of in Acts chapter 6. They were,
the widows.
They were assigned to that role.
Yeah.
But later, I don't know what happened to all the rest of them guys. We see Philip, he's doing other things. He's obviously not doing that.
Right. Because he goes where?
Yeah.
Caesarea, right? Is that where they're at?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Okay. It mentions him on the end of Paul's third journey. I think he comes back to Caesarea, mentions Philip and his daughters. So Philip is obviously no longer there. But there was a temporary need there in Acts 6 with the widows that were being overlooked. Where were these women from? Right. Well, traveling from all over. And then what happened? Jesus said, "Go ye into all the world," and everybody's kind of camped out in Jerusalem. And I would too. But then what happens? Persecution breaks out, and that's I think it's one of the ways that God was using to make sure the gospel is spread. Hey, don't just hang around here. Go ye into all the world. And so that pressure there kind of spread everybody out. Well, now the need is no longer there. So maybe the need could be fulfilled by one person. And 6 left. Philip, I think, in the list is the only one that we know anything more about. Right?
Later, he's the one I can think of.
Yeah, I think he's the only one. So
maybe the other one stayed. There you go. I don't know.
No idea.
But that idea, I'm just saying that idea of for a time and then not doing it. It's one of the things that just never crossed my mind.
And it could be that Lee pointed out that the verb form of diakonos is used there in Acts 6,
right,
but the noun form is not. So whether there was there's obviously a formal appointment going on there.
Right.
Choose from yourselves and let's get these guys about this work. So they did that. I think what tends to happen is that we sort of appoint committees instead. Okay, and I'm not sure that having a couple people try to do something and make a recommendation is not a bad thing.
Right.
But if there's an ongoing need, we tend to fill that by picking a trustworthy person to accomplish the task. So, yeah. I think Garrett's not here today. Yeah. Garrett told me, huh? Okay. Okay. Garrett told me the other, a week or so ago that he had recently been somewhere they studied this, and I think he said they studied it for 3 months or so.
It was quite a long time.
And so I haven't really fleshed out whether they were talking about how to develop the characteristics to become an elder or deacon. That would lend itself to a long study, I think. So, anyway, okay, well, let's move on then. We'll go to 1 Timothy, and in chapter 3, verse 14, I'll read to the end of the chapter. I hope to come to you soon, but I'm writing these things to you so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God, which is the church of the living God, a pillar and buttress of the truth. Great indeed, we confess, is the mystery of godliness. He was manifested in the flesh, vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels, proclaimed among the nations, believed on in the world, taken up in glory. And so, in this section here, Paul starts off with a quick little reference to his travel intentions. I hope to come to you soon. Remember, he is writing this most likely from Macedonia to Timothy in Ephesus. Okay, and the book starts off in chapter 1, verse 3. As I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus so that you may charge certain persons. Okay, so he's talking about the purpose of the book back there, but it looks like he's writing in Macedonia. And he says, basically, I hope to come back to you. Okay? But I'm writing these things to you so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God. So, a mention of his travel intentions. One of the classes I went through was Jeff Smelser, who's coming next month, teaching really the whole week just on Paul's third missionary journey. Okay? Which Jeff kind of calls that his fundraising trip. Okay, and it's true. If you follow a lot of the things along there, he is talking about bringing aid back to the saints in Jerusalem.
He travels back here 20 years.
Yeah. So, so on that trip, when he does come back, what does he skip? Do you remember? If this is written in conjunction with that trip,
He goes down to
Miletus instead.
Yes, for the
He
Ephesian
skips
elders.
Ephesus and it has the Ephesian elders come down to Miletus and meet with them. Okay, and it's the last time, probably the last time that he sees them. So he has ended up skipping Ephesus. But what has happened? If he's calling the Ephesian elders down to Ephesus, Timothy's been able to appoint qualified elders in that place. So, and his third journey was, I think he was in Ephesus for 2 to 3 years. So they're a long time to begin with. So the whole journey may have, taken 5 years or something. So, but he says, I hope to come back to you. I'm writing these things so that if I delay, you may know how one ought to behave in the household of God and the church of God. Now I'm using the ESV, but house of God and the church of God or church of the living God, kind of synonymous terms there. He's using them to mean the same thing. And then he goes on to talk about what is the point of the church's existence to begin with. And he says a pillar and a buttress to the truth. Okay, a pillar, big. You think of these big columns. A pillar holding something up, and then the buttress.
foundation.
Yeah, I think of flying buttresses. You see those old medieval cathedrals over in Europe and stuff, where off the side of the building, if they just built a pillar up and then put a roof on it, the roof starts to collapse and push things out. And so they put a buttress up, and in the case of the cathedrals, you see a flying buttress, means that they're individually held. It looks like a bird almost flying. Okay, but it's to hold the wall in to resist the pressure of the roof coming down. So the basic point that he's making is that the purpose of the church here is to hold up truth. Okay, now there are a lot of churches out there. Do they all do that? No, many of them do not. And so it's important that we find one that and be a part of one and work closer in the one that we are in to making sure that we are always pursuing truth,
Right.
so that we can fulfill what the point of this injunction is, or encouragement, or whatever it is that you want to call that. So, a pillar and a buttress of the truth. And then he has this thing on, great indeed we confess is the mystery of godliness. I think he makes kind of a real abrupt jump right here, I think. It doesn't flow quite as well as some of the other things he talks about. Great indeed we confess is the mystery of godliness. And then, just to kind of break this down a little bit, godliness is what? I've heard of godlikeness kind of being piety. Okay, this is the idea of what godliness is trying to be like God, not in the sense of I am a God, but in the sense of God is holy, so I should be holy. God is merciful, so I should be merciful. God is truthful, so I should be truthful. Okay, God's helpful, I should be helpful. All those sorts of things. And if we model all of the things that we learn about God and His attributes, then we are not just professing godliness, but we're acting out godliness. Okay, so, and the mystery behind that, I think he kind of focuses more kind of away from us and himself, but he says he was manifested in the flesh. Now, if you're reading the translations that are kind of taken off the Nestle Aland version of the Greek, you're probably going to see a he there. So you're talking about the ASV, the ESV, the New American Standard, NIV. Those are going to have he at the beginning of that. The translations that are based on the majority text, at the beginning there, it has theos. And so Gary, yours probably says God.
God with a footnote that says who.
Yeah. And so some of the translations actually, the Greek word there is who or he. And I think you get to the same place.
Yeah.
But there is the difference in translation. So who's the he that was manifested in the flesh? God. Right? God was the one that manifested in the flesh, and that manifestation was Jesus.
Jesus told Thomas, "You see me,
you've seen the Father." Right. Right. So God is manifested in the flesh as Jesus, and vindicated or justified by or in the Spirit, depending on your translation. What could that be a reference to?
Proved in the Spirit.
Yeah, I think so. Vindicated, shown that this really is the person he claims to be. So we were talking about the Spirit working through Jesus and the miracles that Jesus performed. As a man, Jesus really could not accomplish any of those signs and wonders and miracles. Okay.
God was with him.
Right. So that would be kind of the vindicated by the Spirit, seen by angels. When's that?
Well, I mean,
starts at birth,
I
right?
was gonna say lots of times. Right?
Yeah. Announced at birth by the heavenly host. When else would Jesus have been seen by angels?
Well, obviously his death.
Okay.
Well, yeah, but then also in the garden, didn't the angels came and ministered to him?
Okay.
Temptation.
What's that?
Temptation.
Temptation?
Yeah.
Jesus, yeah.
Transfiguration.
Other times? This is the one we don't think about very much. What about Jesus in his pre-existent state?
Oh yeah.
Okay? Before he created the world and everything in it. Okay? Because his existence goes before that. Okay? So, and then proclaimed, preached among the nations.
Book of Acts, right?
Yeah, the book of Acts. The book of Acts is full of that. So Acts 2 and 3, in a sense, the entire world was gathered in Jerusalem. I mean, yes, the Jewish religious world, but it's proclaimed there, and that is spread. Where else, Ethan?
Well, if you look back at all the prophets and all the people, even back in the Old Testament, it was proclaimed then.
Yeah?
Those things, proclaiming him,
Right.
Isaiah and all that.
So those prophecies, because they were fulfilled in Jesus, showing that he was the Christ, that has been proclaimed throughout the world. Romans 10, Romans 10:18. Go back to 17. 17. Faith comes from hearing, hearing through the word of Christ. But I ask, have they not heard? Indeed they have, for their voice has gone out to all the earth, and their words to the ends of the world. Okay? There are other places where it talks about the gospel going into all of the world. So I think that is the point that Paul's making up there.
Well, Paul said that in Colossians. It's gone to the whole world.
Right. Right. And then taken up in glory. Where's that?
Obviously, they saw it a couple times there in the Gospels.
Yeah.
He was taken up.
Yeah, the ascension is what it's referred to.
You missed one.
Did I? Believed on in the world? Okay. Believed on in the world is, we're evidence of that.
That's right.
Okay. I mean, he didn't know about us back then when he wrote it, but it still applies to us, and it applied back then, so sorry. So the ascension, Mark 16. Is it covered in Matthew? Is that the one that?
Covered in Acts.
Yeah, early on in Acts. Matthew ends with the Great Commission and doesn't reference the ascension. But Luke does, Luke 24, near the end of that. So, okay. Any questions about that little section there through the end of chapter 3? Okay.
There's a lot of the pillar and ground of the truth in this mystery of godliness.
Yes.
Uphold this.
Yes.
This is
Yeah, and I was kind of reviewing through this this morning again, and the number of times in Timothy, I tend to highlight things in a particular color that are similar in structure and everything else. And if you go through 1 Timothy in chapter 1, verse 15, the saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance.
Right.
Chapter 3, he starts off, the saying is trustworthy. In chapter 4, verse 9, the saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance. And if you get into 2 Timothy, in chapter 2, the saying is trustworthy. So he's reviewing these things that need to be understood really as doctrinal sorts of thing
Yeah.
that make up what this truth is that he's talking about. So, John.
Even though that little part 16 is confusing with the rest of the chapter, in the true intent of all of Paul's preaching, it's not. Because in the end, what he's saying is God came to earth as Jesus. So Jesus was on the earth. We had to believe that. We believe that he was here as a man and he was seen by angels and stuff. We preached to him. So we preach about him now. But so he was seen on earth. He died. That's part of the preaching to the Gentiles that's being done.
Yep.
And we are firm, we are, trying to think of the right word. And part of also our belief is that he rose again to heaven.
Right.
So in all those little parts there, even though it's not what we usually see, it's all stated right there in that.
Right.
He was here on earth, he died, he arose, and then he went to heaven.
Right. You at the beginning of that, where it talks about the mystery of godliness, we've talked about this a little before. It's not the do type mystery sort of stuff, okay? But the idea that it's something that's just not revealed for a time, and now it has been, okay? That we can be like God. We can model our behavior after God's behavior. Those things are now revealed. They're understood. Jonathan and Alice are going to have a baby in a couple months, Lord willing, right? The mystery of parenthood is not understood to them right now. Okay? But Marcus and Crystal understand it, and they used to be stuck in that mystery of parenthood. But that mystery of parenthood has been revealed to them, just like it's been revealed to you guys, and 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 you guys. George Tweed's back there. Hey, kind of. There are mysteries yet to go, right? Okay? And part of that is, how as a parent am I to go about shaping my children's understanding of what the world is really about? Okay? And I'm still stuck in part of that mystery too. And it's compounded by having grandchildren. So, okay. Thank you all, and we'll pick up with chapter 4 next week.